Jajarasarasitam cha Narayanam tam prabham Shri Guru Charanam Vande Namana Priyasthaya Bhutale Rupanuga Bhakti cha Kripamurti Narayanam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindho Devacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. First of all, our praise is coming up with the arms unto the lotus feet of our most worshipful Sri Gurudev. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupad Shishima Bhakti Vedanta Narayan Goswami Sundar Maharaj to Advaita Guru Varga and all assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavas. So we continue with our daily Gatha, reading of Srimad Bhagavatam. Vaishnava very mercifully has arranged this, making us get used to this habit. Starting the day with Srimad Bhagavatam. We are now in the fourth chapter. Now, fourth chapter entitled The Appearance of Sri Narad Muni. Text 1. Vyasa Uvacha Iti Gurvanam Samstoya Moninam Dirghashaktinam Vidapulapati Sudam Bhakticha Sonaka Kavi. Translation. Vyasadeva said, on hearing Sutta Goswami speak thus, Sonaka Muni, who was the elderly, learned leader of all the rishis, engaged in that prolonged sacrificial ceremony, congratulated Sutta Goswami by addressing him as follows. Purport by His Divine Grace, His Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhu. In a meeting of learned men, when there are congratulations or addresses for the speaker, the qualifications of the congratulator should be as follows. He must be the leader of the house and an elderly man. He must be vastly learned also. Sri Sonaka Rishi had all these qualifications, and thus he stood up to congratulate Sri Sutta Goswami when he expressed his desire to present Srimad Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from Sukadeva Goswami, and also realize it personally. Personal realization does not mean that one should, out of vanity, attempt to show one's own learning by trying to surpass the previous Acharya. He must have full confidence in the previous Acharya, and at the same time, he must realize the subject matter so nicely that he can present the matter for the particular circumstances in a suitable manner. The original purpose of the text must be maintained. No obscure meaning should be screwed out of it, yet it should be presented in an interesting manner for the understanding of the audience. This is called realization. The leader of the assembly, Sonaka, could estimate the value of the speaker, Sri Sutta Goswami, simply by his uttering Yatha Nitam and Yatha Mati, and therefore he was very glad to congratulate him in ecstasy. No learned man should be willing to hear a person who does not represent the original Acharya. So the speaker and the audience were bona fide in this meeting. Where Bhagavatam was being recited for the second time, That should be the standard of recitation of Bhagavatam, so the real purpose can be served without difficulty. Unless discipline is created, Bhagavatam recitation for extraneous purposes is useless labor both for the speaker and for the audience. Text 2. Shonaka Uvacha Suta Suta Mahabhaga Padaro Padanam Katham Bhagavatim Punyam Yat Aha Bhagavan Shubha. Translation. Shonaka said, O Sutta Goswami, you are the most fortunate and respected of all those who can speak and recite. Please relate the pious message of Srimad Bhagavatam, which was spoken by the great and powerful sage Sukadeva Goswami. Purport. Sutta Goswami is twice addressed here by Shonaka Goswami out of great joy because he and the members of the assembly were eager to hear the text of Bhagavatam uttered by Shukadeva Goswami. They were not interested in hearing it from a bogus person who would interpret it in his own way to suit his own purpose. Generally, the so-called Bhagavatam reciters are either professional readers or so-called learned impersonalists who cannot enter into the transcendental personal activities of the Supreme Person. Such impersonalists twist some meanings out of Bhagavatam to suit and support impersonalist views. And the professional readers at once go to the 10th canto to misexplain the most confidential part of the Lord's pastimes. Neither of these reciters are bona fide persons to recite Bhagavatam. Only one who is prepared to present Bhagavatam in the light of Shukadeva Goswami, and only those who are prepared to hear Shukadeva Goswami and his representative are bona fide participants in the transcendental discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam. Text 3. Kasmin yuge pavitrayam sthaneva kena hetuna Buddha Samchurita Krishna Pitavan Samhitam Muni. Translation. In what period and in what place was this first begun? And why was this taken up? From where did Krishna Dvaipayam, Vyas, the great sage, get the inspiration to compile this literature? Purport. Because Srimad Bhagavatam is the special contribution of Srila Vyasadeva, there are so many inquiries by the learned Shonak Muni. It was known to them that Srila Vyasadeva had already explained the text of the Vedas in various ways up to the Mahabharata for the understanding of less intelligent women, Shudras, and fallen members of the family of twice-born men. Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental to all of them because it has nothing to do with anything mundane. So the inquiries are very intelligent and relevant. Text 4. Tasya putra mahayogi samagrimya vikalpata ekanta madhya uditra guru buddha udeyate. Translation. His son, Vyasadeva's son, was a great devotee, an equibalanced monist, whose mind was always concentrated in monism. He was transcendental to mundane activities, but being unexposed, he appeared like an ignorant person. Purport. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul, and thus he remained always alert, not to be trapped by the illusory energy. In the Bhagavad Gita, this alertness is very lucidly explained. The liberated soul and the conditioned soul have different engagements. The liberated soul is always engaged in the progressive path of spiritual attainment, which is something like a dream for the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul cannot imagine the actual engagements of the liberated soul. While the conditioned soul does dreams about spiritual engagements, the liberated soul is awake. Similarly, the engagement of a conditioned soul appears to be a dream for the liberated soul. A conditioned soul and a liberated soul may apparently be on the same platform, but factually they are differently engaged. and their attention is always alert, either in sense enjoyment or in self-realization. The conditioned soul is absorbed in matter, whereas the liberated soul is completely indifferent to matter. This indifference is explained as follows. Text 5. Vistavannoyantam vishim atmajam apyunatinam devyorya parihadyurnashtasya chitnam Tadviksha vikshati mano jagadrushtamasti stripam vidanatu sudasya vivikta drishte. Translation. While Sri Vyasadeva was following his son, beautiful young damsels who were bathing naked covered their bodies with cloth. Although Sri Vyasadeva himself was not naked, but they have not done so when his son had passed. The sage inquired about this, and the young ladies replied that his son was purified, and when looking at them, made no distinction between male and female. But the sage made such distinctions. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita 5:18, it is said that the learned sage looks equally on a learned and a gentle Brahmin, a chandala, a dog, or a cow, due to his spiritual vision. Srila Sukadeva Goswami attained that stage. Thus, he did not see a male or female. He saw all living entities in different dress. The ladies who were bathing could understand the mind of a man simply by studying his demeanor. Just as by looking at a child, one can understand how innocent he is. Shukadeva Goswami was a young boy, 16 years old, and therefore all the parts of his body were developed. He was naked also, and so were the ladies. But because Shukadeva Goswami was transcendental to sex relations, he appeared very innocent. The ladies, by their special qualifications, could sense this at once, and therefore they were not very concerned about him. But when his father passed, the ladies quickly dressed. The ladies were exactly like his children or grandchildren, yet they reacted to the presence of Vyasadeva according to the social custom, because Srila Vyasadeva played the part of a householder. A householder has to distinguish between a male and female. Otherwise, he cannot be a householder. One should therefore attempt to know the distinction between body and soul without any attachment for male and female. As long as such distinction is there, one should not try to become sannyasi like Shukadeva Goswami. At least, theoretically, one must be convinced that the living entity is neither male nor female. The outward dress is made of matter by material nature to attract the opposite sex, and thus keep one entangled in material existence. A liberated soul is above this perverted distinction. It does not distinguish between one living being and another. For him, they are all one and the same spirit. The perfection of the spiritual vision is the liberated stage, and Srila Sukadeva Goswami attained that stage. Srila Vyasadeva was also in the transcendental stage, but because he was in the householder's life, he did not pretend to be a liberated soul as a matter of custom. Text 6. Katham alamshita orai sampratta purul jamgalam unmatamuka jindava vicharangala sattvaye. Translation. How was he, Srila Sukadeva, the son of Vyas, recognized by the citizens when he entered the city of Hastinapur, now Delhi, after wandering in the province of Kuru and Jamba, appearing like a madman, dumb and retarded? Purport. The present city of Delhi was formerly known as Hastinapur because it was first established by King Hasti. Goswami Sukadeva, after leaving his paternal home, was roaming like a madman, and therefore it was very difficult for the citizens to recognize him. in his exalted position. A sage is not therefore recognized by sight, but by hearing. One should approach a sadhu or great sage not to see, but to hear him. If one is not prepared to hear the words of a sadhu, there is no profit. Shukadeva Goswami was a sadhu who could speak on the transcendental activities of the Lord. He did not satisfy the whims of ordinary citizens. He was recognized when he spoke on the subject of Bhagavatam, and he never attempted jugglery like a magician. Outwardly, he appeared to be a regarded dumb madman, but in fact, he was the most elevated transcendental personality. Text 7. Kadamba Bandave Asya Rajarshir Munasa Sambhara Samabhurtat Yatraisha Satvati Shruti. Translation. How did it so happen that King Parikshit met this great sage, making it possible for this great transcendental essence of the Vedas, Bhagavatam, to be sung to him? Forward. Srimad Bhagavatam is stated here as the essence of the Vedas. It is not an imaginary story as it is sometimes considered by unauthorized men. It is also called Shuka Samhita, or the Vedic hymn spoken by Sri Shukadeva Goswami, the great liberated sage. Text 8. Sagoyo Sagodovana Madhyamhi Griheshu Grihame Avekshati Mahabhagas Kirti Gurumstat Ashramam. Translation. He, Shukadeva Goswami, was accustomed to stay at the door of a householder only long enough for a cow to be milked, and he did this just to sanctify the residence. Purport. Shukadeva Goswami met Emperor Parikshit and explained the text of Srimad Bhagavatam. He was not accustomed to stay at any householder's residence for more than half an hour for the time of milking the cow, and he would just take alms from the fortunate householder. That was to sanctify the residence by his auspicious presence. Therefore, Shukadeva is an ideal preacher established in the transcendental position. From his activities, those who are in the renounced order of life and dedicated to the mission of preaching the message of Godhead should learn that they have no business with householders save and except to enlighten them in transcendental knowledge. Such asking for alms from the householder should be for the purpose of sanctifying his home. One who is in the renounced order of life should not be allured by the glamour of the householder's worldly possessions, and thus become subservient to worldly men. For one who is in the renounced order of life, this is much more dangerous than drinking poison and committing suicide. Text 9. Abhimanyo Sudam Sudam Rahul Bhagavato Tamam Tasya Janma Mahischarcham Karmani Cha Vignishnaham. Translation. It is said that Maharaj Parikshit is a great first-class devotee of the Lord, and that his birth and activities are all wonderful. Please tell us about him. Purport. The birth of Maharaj Parikshit is wonderful because in the womb of his mother, he was protected by the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. His activities are also wonderful because he chastised Kali, who was attempting to kill a cow. To kill cow means to end human civilization. He wanted to protect the cow from being killed by the great representative of sin. His death is also wonderful because he got previous notice of his death, which is wonderful for any mortal being. And thus he prepared himself for passing away by sitting down on the bank of the Ganges and hearing the transcendental activities of the Lord. During all the days he heard Bhagavatam, he did not take food or drink, nor did he sleep a moment. So everything about him is wonderful, and his activities are worth hearing attentively. The desire is expressed herein to hear about him in detail. Text 10. Sasamrat kasya hetu Pandur Manavardana Rayo Pavishto Gangayam Anaditya Virashtiya. Translation. He was a great emperor and possessed all the opulences of his acquired kingdom. He was so exalted that he was increasing the prestige of the Pandu dynasty. Why did he give up everything to sit down on the bank of the Ganges and fast until death? Purport. Maharaj Parikshit was the emperor of the world and all the seas and oceans, and he did not have to take the trouble to acquire such kingdom by his own effort. He inherited it from his grandfathers, Maharaj Yudhishthir and brothers. Besides that, he was doing well in the administration and was worthy of the good names of his forefathers. Consequently, there was nothing undesirable in his opulence and administration. Then why should he give up all these favorable circumstances and sit down on the bank of the Ganges, fasting till death? This is astonishing, and therefore all were eager to know the cause. Text 11. Namantiyat padaniketam atmana Shivaya Maniyadanani Satava Kadam Samirashriyam Angadustyaja Yuvarisatos Rashtum Aho Sahasudi. Translation. He was such a great emperor that all his enemies would come and bow down at his feet and surrender all their wealth for their own benefit. He was full of youth and strength, and he possessed kingly opulences that were difficult to give up. Why did he want to give up everything, including his life? Purport. There was nothing undesirable in his life. He was quite a young man and could enjoy life with power and opulence. So there was no question of retiring from active life. There was no difficulty in collecting the state taxes because he was so powerful and chivalrous that even his enemies would come to him and bow down at his feet and surrender all wealth for their own benefit. Maharaj Parikshit was a pious king. He conquered his enemies, and therefore the kingdom was full of prosperity. There was enough milk, grains, and metals, and all the rivers and mountains were full of potency. So materially everything was satisfactory. Therefore there was no question of untimely giving up his kingdom and life. The sages were eager to hear about all this. Text 12. Sivaya lokasya bhavaya bhutaye yakodamashloka parayanajana jivanti mat natmatam aso parashrayam numojo vidya buddha kalivaram. Translation. Those who are devoted to the cause of the personality of Godhead live only for the welfare, development, and happiness of others. They do not live for any selfish interest. So even though the Emperor Parikshit was free from all attachment to worldly possessions, how could he give up his mortal body, which was the shelter for others? Purport. Parikshit Maharaj was an ideal king and householder because he was a devotee of the personality of Godhead. A devotee of the Lord automatically has all good qualifications, and the emperor was a typical example of this. Personally, he had no attachment for all the worldly opulences in his possession. But since he was king for the all-around welfare of his citizens, he was always busy in the welfare work of the public, not only for this life but also for the next. He would not allow slaughterhouses or killing of cows. He was not a foolish partial administrator who would arrange for the protection of one living being and allow another to be killed. Because he was a devotee of the Lord, he knew perfectly well how to conduct his administration for everyone's happiness, men, animals, plants, and all living creatures. He was not selfishly interested. Selfishness is either self-centered or self-extended. He was neither. His interest was to please the supreme truth, the personality of Godhead. The king is the representative of the Supreme Lord, and therefore the king's interest must be identical with that of the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Lord wants all living beings to be obedient to him and thereby become happy. Therefore, the king's interest is to guide all subjects back to the kingdom of God. Hence, the activities of the citizens should be so coordinated that they can at the end go back home, back to Godhead. Under the administration of a representative king, the kingdom is full of opulence. At that time, human beings need not eat animals. There are ample food grains, milk, fruit, and vegetables, so that the human beings, as well as the animals, can eat sumptuously and to their heart's content. If all living beings are satisfied with food and shelter and obey the prescribed rules, there cannot be any disturbance between one living being and another. Emperor Parikshit was a worthy king, and therefore all were happy during his reign. Text 13. Tatsarvam nasuma chaksva vidoya vina kinchana manitvam vishaye vacham snatam anyatachan visad. Translation. We know that you are expert in the meaning of all subjects, except some portions of the Vedas, and thus you can clearly explain the answers to all the questions we have just put to you. Purport. The difference between the Vedas and the Puranas is like that between the Brahmanas and the Parivrajaka's. The Brahmins are meant to administer some further sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas, but the Parivrajakacharyas, or learned preachers, are meant to disseminate transcendental knowledge to one and all. As such, the Parivrajakacharyas are not always expert in pronouncing the Vedic mantras, which are practiced systematically by accent and meter by the Brahmins, who are meant for administering Vedic rites. Yet it should not be considered that the Brahmins are more important than the itinerant preachers. They are one and different simultaneously because they are meant for the same end in different ways. There is no difference also between the Vedic mantras and what is explained in the Puranas and in Itihasas. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, it is mentioned in the Madhyandina Shruti that all the Vedas, namely the Shama, Atharva, Rig, Yajur, Puranas, Itihasas, Upanishads, and so on, are emanations from the breathing of the Supreme Being. The only difference is that the Vedic mantras are mostly begun with Pranav, Omkar, and it requires some training to practice the metric pronunciation of the Vedic mantras. But that does not mean that Srimad Bhagavatam is of less importance than the Vedic mantras. On the contrary, it is the ripened fruit of all the Vedas, as stated before. Besides that, the most perfectly liberated soul, Srila Sukadeva Goswami, is absorbed in the studies of the Bhagavatam, although he is already self-realized. Srila Sukadeva Goswami is following his footsteps, and therefore his position is not the least less important, because he was not expert in chanting Vedic mantras with metric pronunciation, which depends more on practice than actual realization. Realization is more important than parrot-like chanting. Text 14. Sutta vacha Dvapare samano prapte vitiye yuga parvaye jata parasyogi vasavyam kalaya hare. Translation. Sutta Goswami said, when the second millennium overlapped the third, the great sage Vyasadeva was born to Parashar in the womb of Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu. Report. There is a chronological order of the four millenniums, namely Satya, Dwapara, Treta, and Kali. But sometimes there is an overlapping. During the regime of Vaivasvata Manu, there was an overlapping of the 28th round of the four millenniums, and the third millennium appeared prior to the second. In that particular millennium, Lord Shri Krishna also descends. And because of this, there was some particular alteration. The mother of the great sage Satyavati, the daughter of Vasu, the fisherman, and the father was a great Parasar Muni. That is the history of Vyasadev's birth. Every millennium is divided into 3 periods, and each period is called Sandhya. Vyasadeva appeared in the 3rd Sandhya of that particular age. Text 15. Svakadachit sarasvatya upaspishya jalam shuchi vivikta eka asina udite ravi mandale. Translation. Once upon a time, he, Vyasadeva, as the sun rose, took his morning ablution in the waters of the Saraswati and sat alone to concentrate. Purport. The river Saraswati is flowing in the Badarik Ashram area of the Himalayas. So the place indicated here is Samyapralas in Badarik Ashram, where Sri Vyasadeva is residing. Text 16. Paravaratya rishi kalina vattarama yuga dharma pratikaram praptam yuge. Translation. The great sage Vyasadeva saw anomalies in the duties of the millennium. This happens on the earth in different ages due to the unseen force of time. Purport. The great sages like Vyasadeva are the great souls, and therefore they can see clearly past and future. Thus, he could see the future anomalies in the age of Kali. And accordingly, he made arrangement for the people in general so that they can execute a progressive life in this age, which is full of darkness. The people in general in this age of Kali are too much interested in matter, which is temporary. Because of ignorance, they are unable to evaluate the essence of life, and be enlightened in spiritual knowledge. Next 17. Votikanam cha bhavanam shakti rasam chadarkritam ashradadhanam sattvam yurmedhan rasitayusa Durvagam Chajanam Diksha Mayadiyena Chakshusa Sarvavarnashramanam Yad Dadyo Vikram Amoghadik. Translation. The great sage who was fully equipped in knowledge could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to lack of goodness. Thus, he contemplated for the welfare of men in all statuses and orders of life. Purport. The unmanifested forces of time are so powerful that they reduce all matter to oblivion in due course. In Kali Yuga, the last millennium of a round of 4 millenniums, the power of all material objects deteriorates by the influence of time. In this age, the duration of the material body of the people in general is much reduced, and so is the memory. The action of matter has also not so much incentive. The land does not produce food grains in the same proportions as it did in other ages. The cow does not give as much milk as it used to give formerly. The production of vegetables and fruits is less than before. As such, all living beings, both men and animals, do not have sumptuous, nourishing food. Due to want of so many necessities of life, naturally the duration of life is reduced. The memory is short. Intelligence is meager. Mutual dealings are full of hypocrisy and so on. The great sage Vyasadeva could see this by his transcendental vision. As an astrologer can see the future fate of a man, or an astronomer can foretell the solar and lunar eclipses, those liberated souls who can see through the scriptures can foretell the future of all mankind. They can see this due to their sharp vision of spiritual attainment. And all such transcendentalists who are naturally devotees of the Lord are always eager to render welfare service to the people in general. They are the real friends of the people in general, not the so-called puppet leaders who are unable to see what is going to happen 5 minutes ahead. In this age, the people in general, as well as their so-called leaders, are all unlucky fellows, faithless in spiritual knowledge, and influenced by the age of Kali. They are always disturbed by various diseases. For example, in the present age, there are so many TB patients and TB hospitals. But formerly, this was not so because the time was not so unfavorable. The unfortunate men of this age are always reluctant to give a reception to the transcendentalists, who are representatives of Srila Vyasadeva and selfless workers, always busy in planning something which may help everyone in all statuses and orders of life. The greatest philanthropists are those transcendentalists who represent the mission of Vyasa. Narada, Madhva, Chaitanya, Rupa, Saraswati, and so on. They are all one and the same. The personalities may be different, but the aim of the mission is one and the same, namely, to deliver the fallen souls back home, back to Godhead. That's 19. Chaturvakram Brahmashuddham Prajanam Diksha Vaidikam Vidadhyat Yagya Santatya Vedam Ekam Chaturvidam. Translation. He saw that the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas were means by which the people's occupations could be purified. And to simplify the process, he divided the one Veda into 4 in order to expand them among men. Purport. Formerly, there was only the Veda of the name Yajur, and the 4 divisions of sacrifices were there specifically mentioned. But to make them more easily performable, the Veda was divided into 4 divisions of sacrifice, just to purify the occupational service of the 4 orders. Above the 4 Vedas, namely Ved, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva, there are the Puranas, the Mahabharata, Samhitas, and so on, which are known as the 5th Veda. Sri Vyasadeva and his many disciples were all historical personalities, and they were very kind and sympathetic toward the fallen souls of this age of Kali. As such, the Puranas and Mahabharata were made from related historical facts which explain the teaching of the 4 Vedas. There is no point in doubting the authority of the Puranas and Mahabharata as part and parcels of the Vedas. In the Chandogya Upanishad, the Puranas and Mahabharata, generally known as histories, are mentioned as the 5th Veda. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, that is the way of ascertaining the respective values of the revealed scriptures. Text 20. Vigyajo samahatarvatya vedaschattvara udita ityasa purancha panchamo veda uchyate. Translation. The 4 divisions of the original sources of knowledge, the Vedas, were made separately, but the historical facts and authentic stories mentioned in the Puranas are called the 5th Veda. Text 21. Tatarga Veda Dara Paila Samamro Jaimini Kami Vasampaya Ivaiko Nishnato Yajurusam Buddha. Translation. After the Vedas were divided into 4 divisions, Paila Rishi became the professor of the Rig Veda, Jaimini the professor of the Shama Veda, and Vaisampayan alone became glorified by the Yajur Veda. Purport. The different Vedas were entrusted to different learned scholars for development in various ways. Text 22. Atharva Virasam Asin Sumanto Dharunomani Itihasa Purananam Itange Lumaharshana Translation. The Sumantamuni Angira, who was very devotedly engaged, was entrusted with the Atharva Veda. And my father, Romaharshan, was entrusted with the Puranas and historical records. Purport. In the Shruti Mantras also it is stated that Angira Muni, who strictly followed the rigid principles of the Atharva Veda, was the leader of the followers of the Atharva Veda. Text 23. Ta'eta Rishayo Vedam Swam Swam Vyasyam Une Anekada Sisyaya Parisyaya Stashchisyaya Vedaste Sankino Bhavan. Translation. All these learned scholars in their turn render their entrusted Vedas unto their many disciples, grand disciples, and great grand disciples. And thus the respective branches of the followers of the Vedas came into being. Purport. The original source of knowledge is the Vedas. There are no branches of knowledge, either mundane or transcendental, which do not belong to the original text of the Vedas. They have simply been developed into different branches. They were originally rendered by great, respectable, and learned professors. In other words, the Vedic knowledge broken into different branches by different people, by different disciplic succession, has been distributed all over the world. No one, therefore, can claim independent knowledge beyond the Vedas. Text 24. The Eva Veda tu Vedaya Dharyanti Purusharita Evam Chakara Bhagavan Vyasa Kalpana Vatsalam. Vyasa Kalpana Vatsalam. Translation. Thus the great sage Vyasadeva, who is very kind to the ignorant masses, edited the Vedas so they might be assimilated by less intellectual men. Purport. The Veda is one, and the reasons for its division in many parts are explained herewith. The seed of all knowledge, or the Veda, is not a subject matter which can easily be understood by any ordinary man. There is a stricture that no one should try to learn the Vedas who is not a qualified Brahmin. This stricture has been wrongly interpreted in so many ways. A class of men who claim Brahminical qualifications simply by their birthright in the family of a Brahmin claim that the study of the Vedas is a monopoly of the Brahmin caste only. Another section of the people take this as an injustice to members of other castes who do not happen to take birth in the Brahmin family. But both of them are misguided. The Vedas are subjects which had to be explained even to Brahmaji by the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the subject matter is understood by persons with exceptional qualities of goodness. Persons who are in the mode of passion, ignorance, who are unable to understand the subject matter of the Vedas. Persons who are in the modes of passion and ignorance are unable to understand the subject matter of the Vedas. The ultimate goal of Vedic knowledge is Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. This personality is very rarely understood by those who are in the modes of passion and ignorance. In the Satya Yuga, everyone was situated in the mode of goodness. Gradually, the mode of goodness declined during the Treta and Dwapara, and the general mass of people became corrupt. In the present age, the mode of goodness is almost nil, and so for the general mass of people, the kind-hearted, powerful sage Srila Vyasadeva divided the Vedas in various ways so that they may be practically followed by less intelligent persons in the modes of passion and ignorance. It is explained in the next sloka as follows. Text 25. Shri Shuddha Puja Bandhunam Traina Shruti Gochara Dharma Shreyasi Nidhanam Shreya Evam Bhavedya Iti Vratam Abhyanam Kripaya Munina Kritam Translation. Out of compassion, the great sage thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. Thus, he compiled the great historical narration called the Mahabharata for women, laborers, and friends of the wise woman. We'll pick up from here tomorrow. We'll continue reading this verse and the purport. Jai Shri Gurudev Ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Swami Maharaj Ki Jai,